Let's move on to the next item, because with the Clash on the verge of extinction in the mid-1980s, Joe Strummer fled to Spain, one of my great idols, Joe Strummer. A new film, I Need a Dodge, covers his time there, and the subsequent search for his trusty car. It'll all become clear in the next 10 minutes or so. Earlier on, I spoke to the director of the film, Nick Hall, and here's what happened. Nick, thanks a million for joining us.
No problem, my pleasure.
This film, I Need a Dodge, about Joe Strummer, it's a bit of a weird one, wasn't it? Because it proves that famous footballers in the Premier League these days weren't the only ones to leave their cars knocking around somewhere and not being able to find them.
That's right, yeah. Well, I came across the football story. Who was that?
I can't remember. Was it Balotelli? It's usually Balotelli, isn't it?
Could have been, yeah, it could have been. I came across that and I thought, well, that could be the sequel. Somebody suggested I investigate what happened to the footballer's car after this one.
Absolutely. What do we know about this point in Joe Strummer's life? Because it was kind of towards the end, the tail end of the Clash, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, very much. It was the, I think really one of the kind of, if documentary films, or we try and give them a universal theme, something that, you know, can be appreciated outside of the small group of fans that watch it.
Yeah.
It's probably about somebody who was very much in the in the public eye, but the eye of the hurricane, reaching a crossroads in their professional life.
Uh-huh.
He made a big mistake. He threw out Mick Jones from the Clash. Now he threw out the songwriter.
Many would argue the most talented member of the Clash.
Right, yeah, and the other, probably the second most talented member of the Clash, had already gone, Topper.
Yeah.
So it was he discovered that he was, he wasn't in a very talented place, if you like, in terms of, and so he took off. You know, it wasn't really working, and he picked up some contacts that he'd already had from the pre-Clash days, when he shared a squat with two Spanish girls. One of them went on to be Palm Olive from the Slits.
Yeah.
And it was an escape, really. It was an escape, and then it became something more regular. You know, he was backwards and forwards for about a year and a half. But it was about, and I spoke to Nick Shepherd, Pete Howard, I couldn't remember his name, about that period, and Joe disappeared regularly, and they didn't know where he was, but he was under a lot of pressure. The manager was trying to take over the band, so yeah.
He needed to get out and do something. What was it that attracted you to the story? Was it the idea of trying to find the car, and that's a quirky thing to try and find a car that you've maybe abandoned a few years earlier, or was it the idea of, you know, where his head was at that particular time?
Yeah, I think what attracted me, I've lived in Spain for the last 15 years. One of the first books I read was a short Spanish biography of the Clash.
Okay.
And the photos, the first time I saw the images of Joe at the Alhambra in Granada.
Yeah.
So that grabbed my attention, and then the stories I discovered the stories of him going to. There's some great anecdotes of him going to buy shovels to dig up Garcia Lorca. So, you know, nobody knows where he's buried, and Joe probably stoned one night, got a couple of his Spanish friends, and off they went to, in the Dodge, incidentally,
okay,
to look for Lorca's grave. So I imagined, I think, that it would make a nice biopic. You know, I could imagine this sort of low-budget independent film about this crazy rocker turning up in Spain. And then somebody, while I was investigating, somebody gave me a cassette of the interview from Spanish Radio 3.
Because he went on Spanish radio to ostensibly put a search out for the car, because he'd abandoned it, what was it, 1986? That's
right, yeah.
And then it was kind of an appeal almost, if anyone knew where his car was, wasn't it?
Yeah, about 10 years later, a Spanish radio presenter doing a live from Glastonbury spotted Joe at his campfire, and they did this, you know, Joe in his broken Spanish and appealing to the people of Spain to look for, and he claimed then that he'd been back 7 times and you know, couldn't find his car. So yeah, so I thought, well, that gave me the narrative thread, if you like. I mean, that gave me the drive of the thing, rather than just having just interviewing the guys that were around at the time.
Sure.
So,
and I mean, the Clash were pretty popular in Spain as well, weren't they?
They were, yeah. They played one tour. They played 3 dates in Spain in 81, I think. But definitely. I mean, everybody knows who the Clash are.
How did you go about finding the people that you spoke to in the film, particularly the Spanish interviewees? It must have been pretty hard to track them down. Yeah,
some of them. I mean, once you make the initial contacts, it kind of one leads to another.
Yeah.
A great contact, the guy who gave me the cassette, actually, he was Joe's kind of Spanish teacher at the time and friend. So he gave me a few contacts. And then others that have since moved on have been a bit more difficult. But what's been difficult actually is getting archive. There's not. I mean, everyone's got a camera now, and probably in the UK in 85, 86, there were more cameras than there were in Spain at the time. So nobody took photographs of these nights out with Joe Strummer.
Is a different
era. And he recorded an album. I mean, he produced an album for a local band. They went off to Madrid, which is a great story. He produced it in parallel with Cut the Crap, but he was kind of, toing and froing, and he put his own money in for these Spanish guys to finish the recording, and so he got very much involved.
He was kind of a workaholic, wasn't he? He couldn't not be working on something at any given time, Joe Strummer, really, could he?
That's right, yeah. So they say. These guys say what we've heard already, that Joe would sleep in the recording studio, and or sleep with his boots on type of thing, and
And what did they make of that? What did they make of this? Because ostensibly he was a celebrity to them as well as, a kind of crazy guy flying around Spain, but he was also a famous person to them. What did they make of him as a person?
Well, they were starstruck. I mean, there was a real. The guy, he turned up in a bar in Granada looking for this band because they had a friend in common, and he didn't declare himself. And they didn't recognise him. He had a beard and a lumberjack's jacket on or something, like a checked, Canadian jacket, and there was this kind of and he said to them, I want to show you some lyrics to the songwriter in the band, and he was like, who's this? English guy,
Yeah.
And then someone clocked him, is that not Joe Strummer? But they do, the band, I interviewed the 4 members of the band, and they all refer to this, they were much younger than him. I mean, how old was he? He was 32, 33, I suppose, and they were 20, so there was this sort of almost paternalistic. And he'd give them lessons on how to deal with the press, how to prepare yourself for the photo shoot, and, dealing with a record company and all that stuff.
Because he'd been through the mill himself at that stage. Who did you interview that we would know, perhaps from the UK side in the film?
The 2 guys from Clash Mark II, as they're referred to, Pete and Nick, they were great. And Gabby, his first partner, who went with him on the the initial trips, and she actually at one point says that she was back in England and got this call saying, I've got this great new car, but then she was saying, you're not bringing it here. You're definitely not bringing that back to there. So everyone's looking for this car except for the only person who was not having any of it.
Absolutely, yeah. What did you learn about Strummer himself from making the film? Was there stuff that came up that you maybe weren't aware of before?
Good question. I don't know, really. It was interesting. We all know a lot about him. That's something that I was determined that this should be just about. He arrives in Spain, and then he abandons his car and goes back for the birth of his second daughter. So it's very much a closed. It comes out a lot. A lot. There's almost this philanthropic side to him. It's quite interesting, really, the parallels with Strummerville, the foundation, the family setup for new bands and whatnot. it's kind of like what he was doing with this band from Granada. You know, he was giving them a leg up. He was going to get nothing out of it apart from headache, you know, criticism. He couldn't possibly gain from it. He was the singer with the Clash, you know. And but he believed in these guys. He wanted to try something new. Probably spurred on by, you know, Mick and Big Audio Dynamite, and he was looking for his own project, you know.
Needed to move on, yeah, absolutely. And is it true that some of the residents in Granada they've campaigned to have a street named after him? That's
right, yeah, yeah. And it's gone through.
Oh, it has?
I don't think it's been named yet, but it's been voted through, so there will be a street, yeah.
It's going to happen, wow, that's amazing.
Calle Joe Strummer in Granada at some point, yeah.
Fantastic stuff. And I've got to ask you, did the Dodge ever end up getting found?
I knew, yeah. I mean, obviously you did have to. I haven't found the Dodge. I've got a lot further than. I mean, there was a real investigation here. Obviously, you know, I was following up a lot of leads. I found the car park where it was left through the guy who parked it with him that night, who's now in Marseille. And then the guy who's got the car park now, his dad had it. His dad kept the car. He tried to contact the people, you know, the girl who had it registered to her name, but it hasn't. I haven't, no. And maybe as a result of the film, this is one of the things. I've been on Spanish radio again, appealing to.
There's a theme emerging here,
Nick. The people of Spain. Yeah, we just know the registration. It was pearl, according to Joe. The colour, with a black vinyl roof, and it's registered in Oviedo, northern Spain.
Okay.
So, anyway.
Well, it's possible that you might still come across it because you're still looking for funding for the film, aren't you?
Yeah, we've launched a crowdfunding campaign on Indiegogo.com.
Okay.
So it's Indiegogo.com/I need a Dodge. There's some great. We've just got a new perk in, I have to say. So people who contribute can get a pair of jeans called John Graham Mellor, which of course is Joe Strummer's real name.
Yeah.
And they're expensive, like handmade artisanal jeans, and they've given me 15 pairs to give away, you know, in return for contributions. So
there's a little bit of an incentive there. Great stuff. Yeah. Well, best of luck with that, Nick. It sounds like a fascinating film. And when do you anticipate maybe getting it completed?
For early next year, hopefully. Okay. All being well. It's all shot, so yeah.
Great stuff. We'll look forward to seeing the final product, and maybe, just maybe, the Dodge will turn up in the meantime.
Just fingers crossed.
Thanks a million for talking to us, Nick.
Okay, cheers, Richie.
Joe and Keith. We're starting our brand new show on Phantom Monday at 7 a.m.